Oh, it's 5 o'clock. We'll call a meeting to order for Community Development Committee. It's December 15th meeting, and our first item is that we were looking to the approval of the minutes. Well, before we do that, I want to make a change to our agenda. We're looking to remove item 5 from the business items on the agenda.
I'd like to keep it on there. The agenda, the number five on our business items for the EDC.
I'd second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to then retain item 5 of the business items. Is all in favor? Well, first, any discussion on this, or do you want to just wait till we do it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd rather go through it and talk about it and get it taken care of.
I agree with that, and if in the end we want to table it, we can table it at that time. But
Okay, so hearing that, we need a consensus on that. All in favor?
Yeah, basically they can overrule the chair, which I think they've done.
They have.
All the powers you've had.
So moving on, then we will follow the agenda as printed. So minutes approval, are there any objections or anything you've seen in the minutes that you want changed? Okay, so we'll keep the minutes as written. We'll move on to public comment. Is there anyone from the public tonight that wishes to speak? Now, keep in mind that we will be doing public hearings in regards to the and I think we normally allow for questions and things during the public hearings. So if it's something in regards to the 2 items for the public hearings, you'll be able to speak during that time. If anybody has anything else, wishes to speak for public comment. Anyone else that wishes to speak for public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on then to the public hearings. So, John, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Your first hearing tonight is a rezoning application by Mr. Eric Walquist in the town of Katy, and I'm just going to get down to the maps here. The rezoning request is for a 39-acre parcel in the town of Katy. The request is to rezone from R1 residential to Ag 2 agricultural district. A little bit of background on the parcel location. It's in the very southeast corner of the county, along Highway 128 and Highway 129, about 2 miles east of Spring Valley, and about 4 miles south of the I-94 and State Highway 128 interchange. Oops, sorry about that. The applicant is requesting the rezoning tonight in order to conduct agricultural entertainment uses on the property, to include therapeutic petting zoo and other agricultural entertainment uses in the future. Agricultural entertainment uses include farm-based businesses or enterprises that combine elements and characteristics of agriculture and tourism. Such uses are only allowed in the C2 commercial district and the certified agricultural districts, that being the Ag 1 and Ag 2. We just went through the location map. As part of the code, if any event exceeds 100 persons, which doesn't seem to be the case, but if that does happen, the property owner would be required to file an event plan that itemizes some of the issues located in the table below, such as parking, operation, ingress, egress. But based on the correspondence from the applicant, I would not anticipate that being the case. Just something we wanted to point out. An aerial overview of the property shows the 39 acres with access off of 128. The general area is primarily agriculture, cropped. We do have some livestock facilities in the area, but again, mostly crop type of uses. This is a view of the property looking west from Highway 128. You see the house in the foreground, a number of outbuildings that would facilitate the proposed therapeutic petting zoo. Just some general features of the property. The area is primarily zoned R1 residential. That does allow most agricultural uses. As I mentioned earlier, the area can generally be described as rural cropped agriculture with scattered farmsteads and livestock facilities. Next, what we do is we take a review of the comprehensive plan. And under state statute, the rezoning of properties must be consistent with the local government unit's comprehensive plan. And in this case, the town of Katy does have a comprehensive plan, and they designate this area as agriculture. You see the property highlighted by the red arrow, with the 39 acres being circled in red. The agriculture designation within the town of Katy comp plan intends uses for maintaining the production of ag commodities, including forestry. It also encourages development to occur in a manner which preserves the ag land and rural character of the community and protects water resources while minimizing potential land use conflicts. In this case, the applicant is proposing to use some of the existing buildings, so we do not see any immediate impact to adjacent agriculture. Likewise, the St. Croix County Comprehensive Land Use Plan designates this property as agriculture. Generally, that area is shown in blue, the 39 acres off of 128. Under county under county planning, the primary intent of the ag land use designation is to preserve productive ag lands, promote further investments in farming, and maintain farmer eligibility for incentive programs. Next, we do a quick review of any impacts to natural resources. We're going to go through these fairly quickly because there are really no impacts to prairie remnant sites, waterfowl protection areas, sensitive areas, or scenic and rec areas. We do have a number of environmental corridors that abut the property to the northwest and northeast, and these primarily correspond to some larger wooded areas. Likewise, we don't see any impacts to any shorelands, wetlands, floodplains, or any areas such as that. On the very west side of the site, there are some limiting soils for private on-site septic systems, but there are no systems proposed for that area. And then showing the soil mapping indicates very productive farmland in the area. We do show some minor sloping in the 12% range just south of the homestead. The homestead sits on a little bit of a plateau that sits higher than the adjacent agricultural area. Governmental agency review, the Town of Katy Town Board did review the request December 5th, and they did recommend approval of the rezoning. Some of the policies that help guide the decision-making process is taking a look at some of our land use policies and objectives, guiding development to locations and conditions that minimize adverse impacts to natural resources. We just walked through those categories with really no impacts to those categories. Development in the county shall be consistent with the character of the surrounding neighborhood, countryside, or terrain. The proposed use will not impact any of the adjacent agricultural uses. And again, guiding rural development to locations that will not convert productive ag land, which is not the case here. Also, that the use be not in conflict with the St. Croix County Natural Resource Management Plan, and that the property would comply with Chapter 15 of the zoning. The committee tonight shall only recommend approval for rezoning subject to the following provisions: that the use is consistent with the St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan, the Natural Resource Management Plan, and the St. Croix County Zoning Ordinance and all other applicable codes, and that the town has not disapproved of the rezoning request. In this case, they did recommend approval, and that the rezoning and use is consistent with surrounding zoning districts and surrounding land uses and does not result in spot zoning. The actions of the committee tonight, you have two alternatives. You can recommend approval of the amendment, recommend disapproval of the amendment, or in the alternative, if there's some additional information the committee seeks, there is an option to table. Following review of the request, looking at the comprehensive plans and having conversations with the town of Katy, St. Croix County staff is recommending of the rezoning amendment from R1 residential to Ag2 agriculture based on the following findings: that technical review findings 1 through 6 that we just covered is consistent with the county comprehensive plan and the county natural resource management plan, that the town of Katy and St. Croix County comp plans include adopted language supporting agricultural uses on the subject property, that the future land use plan maps of both the county and the town designate this property as agriculture. The subject property is identified on the St. Croix County Farmland Preservation Map and is eligible for the Ag2 zoning district designation. The Town of Katy Town Board has recommended approval of the rezoning request. The property does abut and has access to State Highway 128. The Wisconsin DOT has reviewed the application and has authorized an access permit for up to 50 vehicle trips per day to the property, and that the proposed use is consistent with and comply with the standards in Chapter 15 zoning. And just to add, to conclude the presentation, we did receive one public comment via email, and that was from an abutting property owner, the Ellisons, stating that they do have land bordering the subject property to the south and west, and they have no issues with the changing of the zoning tonight from R1 to Ag2. And that concludes the overview of the request.
So do we have any, first off, is there anybody here that wishes to speak on behalf of the public hearing or questions? When you go up, please state your name and address. Thank you.
I'm Stacy Schultz. I'm at 49 State Highway 128, Spring Valley. I'm directly across. I think it'd be a great asset to the community to rezone them so they can open this. I have no issue at all.
Thank you. Is there anybody here that wishes to, anybody else that wishes to speak for it? Okay, is there anybody here that wishes to speak against it? Okay, seeing none. Is there any questions? All right, we'll close the public hearing for this particular issue and move on to agenda item 1 in the business items. So amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance in section 33, township 28 north, range 15 west in the town of Katy, rezoning 39 acres from R1 residential zoning district to Ag2 agricultural zoning district.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'd support that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. We'll move back to public hearings for item number 2.
For the benefit of the Walquists, this will go to the county board for final consideration on Tuesday, January 3rd. The second public hearing tonight, again, is another rezoning, this one in the town of Stanton by Mr. Luke Benson. I'll get to it in just a moment. Excuse me. Good evening again, Mr. Chair and committee members. This particular rezoning application is from Mr. Luke Benson, located at 2138 County Road T in the town of Stanton. This particular rezoning is to request a rezoning of 0.93 acres from the Ag 1 residential district to the R1 residential district. The purpose of the request is to rezone this acreage to increase the lot coverage, to construct an outbuilding, and ultimately operate a small business for service and maintenance of planting and harvest equipment. Again, here's a location map off of County Road T, just southwest of Deer Park by about 1.5 miles. And just off the map to the south is Highway 64 that runs east-west. This is an aerial photo of the property. The existing lot is 0.81 acres. You can see the house in the middle of the lot with a smaller outbuilding to the rear of the property, County Road T to the east. This next map is going to show the additional 0.93 acres highlighted in black that would be added to the 0.81 acre lot. So in total, when everything is concluded and purchased and rezoned, the applicant will own 1.74 acres. And again, the subject of the rezoning is the area highlighted in black, which is currently Ag 1, and then we'll go to R1. A wider aerial view of the property, you see County T going north-south, the subject property in red. Primarily agriculture in the area. We do have a stand of trees that runs directly south of the subject property following County T. Again, here's a highlight of the surrounding properties. Primarily properties owned in Ag 1. The existing R1 parcel that Mr. Benson owns is shown in the lighter yellow shade. And the area can generally be described as agricultural cropland with some adjacent wooded areas to the south, as I just mentioned earlier. Again, we take a look at the comprehensive plans to see how these documents guide the property for future use. Again, the rezoning must be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. So we first take a look at the Town of Stanton future land use plan map from their 2006 Heartland Plan. And the parcel is designated as an existing residential site along with ag, forest, and grassland. Some of the policies and objectives that go with that designation is that it encourages land uses that will maintain the town's rural character and agricultural heritage, maintain the integrity of zoning districts by considering distinct uses in separation, and to continue to allow limited conversion of ag land for residential development. So in this case, the applicant is seeking to add some property to do a future use that would have to be a separate application process that would allow for the repair of agricultural machinery, which does support agricultural uses within the town. Next, we take a look at the St. Croix County Comprehensive Future Land Use Plan, which designates this property as agriculture. Again, the intent of the agriculture district is to preserve productive ag lands, promote further investments in farming, and maintain farm eligibility and incentive programs. Much like the last application, the subject area does not really have any impact to natural resource features. No impacts to remnant sites of prairies, sensitive areas, scenic and rec areas, or environmental corridors. Nor are there any shorelands, wetlands, floodplains, or any limitations located on the property. And you can see by the crosshatch and the key, much of this area is productive farmland, as evidenced by the aerial photo. The Town Board of Stanton did review the request and does recommend approval of the rezoning. They did so on December 8th, 2022. Again, taking a look at some of the policies that would impact this request, again, guiding rural development to locations that will not convert productive ag land. The county will update zoning codes to provide more zoning districts to meet the diverse needs of the county. As part of our land use and zoning code update in 2019, we did add commercial ag uses to the R1 districts, so some of those uses would support agriculture in this part of the county. Support ag-based businesses that encourage the viability and diversity of ag in the community. And again, some other policies that we documented. The request must be consistent or not in conflict with the St. Croix County Natural Resource Management Plan. And we just reviewed some of the maps and we don't really see any impacts to natural resources. The property will comply with standards in Chapter 15 zoning. For tonight, the Community Development Committee shall only recommend approval of the rezoning subject to the following provisions. Consistency with the Comprehensive Plan, the Natural Resource Management Plan, St. Croix County Ordinance, that the town has not disapproved the rezoning request, and the use is consistent and does not result in spot zoning and not be in conflict with surrounding zoning districts, and that the use is consistent with surrounding land uses. Tonight, again, the alternatives for the committee would be to recommend approval or disapproval of the zoning amendment. In reviewing some of the findings for staff recommendation, we are recommending approval of the rezoning amendment request from Ag 1 Agriculture to R1 Residential District based on the technical findings discussed above. That the town of Stanton and St. Croix County comp plans have adopted language supporting limited commercial and ag uses on the subject property. That the town board has recommended approval of the request. The proposed use is consistent with and can comply with the standards in Chapter 15 zoning. And that the applicant will ultimately need to apply for a conditional use permit with the Board of Adjustment for the operation of a small business for the service and maintenance of planting and harvest equipment in the R1 zoning district. The current lot size of the Benstead parcel is 0.81 acres. The acreage being added to the parcel is 0.93 acres, resulting in a 1.74 acre parcel. This is still below the 2-acre lot minimum in the town of Stanton. However, the county zoning ordinance does allow the zoning administrator to approve a change in property if the change will lessen the nonconformity, which would be the case here. The property abuts County Road T. The St. Croix County Highway Department has reviewed the application and does not have any concerns with the rezoning application. Based on that, staff recommends approval of the rezoning request, and that summarizes the overview of the application.
Thank you, John. Another thorough review. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak on behalf of this rezoning public hearing, at the public hearing? Yes. Again, please state your name and address for the record.
So, members of the board, my name is Luke Benson. So I am the current parcel owner and been spending quite a bit of time working with John and others as we started to figure this process out. John, thanks for the very thorough explanation of what we're hoping to do and accomplish there someday. But I understand that parts of this rezoning request still fall underneath the county's required minimums. However, I think it does directly support the ag-based community that we have there in Stanton Township as well as the county. And so just wanted to take an opportunity to introduce myself, and certainly happy to answer any questions that any of you may have this evening. So thank you.
Hey, is there anyone here that is here to represent not moving forward with this request for rezoning? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion and move on to item 2 of the business items. So item 2 of the business items, we're looking at amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance in section 14, Township 31 North, Range 17 West, Town of Stanton, for rezoning of .93 acres from Ag 1 agricultural to R1 residential zoning district.
Based on the review tonight of John's review and what I've read, I make a motion that we accept this.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second by Sean, and any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries, unanimous. So we'll move on to item 3 of the business items, an ordinance correcting ordinance number 902 of 2022, comprehensive zoning ordinance, section 20, from Township 31 North, Range 16 West, Town of Ceylon, rezoning 7 acres from R1 residential zoning district to C2 commercial zoning district.
So, Mr. Chair and committee members, if you recall back in October, the board approved a rezoning request in the town of Ceylon for 7 acres, and the property was going to be used for agricultural, entertainment, wedding barn type of uses. And so as the application and the approvals went through the process, all of the background information, the ordinance title, the staff report, the public hearing notice correctly placed the zoning label from R1 to C2. However, the actual ordinance that adopted the change, unfortunately, I read from R1 to R2. So the corrected ordinance tonight would correctly read from R1 to C2. We checked with Corporation Counsel to make sure we reviewed the process in which to make the correction, and it did need to go back to the committee before it went to the board for a recommendation. So that's kind of the Reader's Digest version of what happened. We had everything correctly labeled except the actual ordinance, so we apologize for that.
So we have a motion to approve this change.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, Ryan for motion and Jerry for a second.
Yeah, second.
Any discussion on it? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. So motion
you.
carries. Thank you. Next, we have the financial report for November 2022 with Ken.
If you look at the financial report, it's through November of this year. Just a couple of highlights. If you look at, I was looking at revenues mostly. We've hit some of our targets. So Register of Deeds, they're now in the green ink. That's a good thing. That means we received more revenues than we were anticipating. Similarly with parks, so if we look at parks, we'd budgeted 381, we're at 399, 588 through the end of November. So we've hit our budgeted number by over 18,000. It is still a little bit lower than last year, but very close to where we were. Pretty much everything else is tracking on target for their budgets, but if you had any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to item 5, consideration of creating a contract with St. Croix Economic Development Corporation.
Yeah, I stayed up here to give you some background information on it. So the question came up when the CASA contract was discussed about funding CASA and contracting with them if we had a contract with all the other nonprofits. For the most part, we do with the Fair Board and UW Extension, but we don't currently or have not previously with the Economic Development Corporation. So we started talking about that, and I think I've sort of figured out where there's some potential, not disagreement, but different perspectives of the Economic Development Corporation as an organization and our participation or membership with them. And so when I was talking with president of their board, Aaron Sundin, and he's here and he can clarify for me if I get any of the points wrong, but you know, we talked about St. Croix County and they view us as a member, a significant financial contributor, but we are a member of their organization. Whereas other members of the county board have talked to me about we're purchasing services from the Economic Development Corporation. So that's two different things. And so if we are just a member of a service club of the Economic Development Corporation, I don't believe we would need a contract. But if we're purchasing services from them, then we should have a contract with an expectation of what it is that we're buying from them. So really, the first question I need answered from you guys, because I take direction from the elected officials, is which way it is. So is it a membership or is it a purchase of service? And that will dictate the right format for me to contract for those services then, or not to. And I don't know if you want to open it up for the president of the Economic Development Corp to clarify any of that or give his perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members, and staff. My name is Aaron Sundin. I live in Hudson, Wisconsin, work for Derrick Companies in Richmond, Wisconsin. I also serve as the president of the EDC board this year. And we talked about, I've been talking to Ken when he reached out to us about this services contract. And, you know, a lot of the initiatives that the EDC that are part of our core purpose are really items that are on that list. So we currently do the things that are being asked in this agreement. However, it's the context of the agreement that we don't necessarily agree with. We had come back with a memorandum of understanding, which is I had called around to different economic development corporations in the area. The closest I could find to an agreement like this was an MOU, and that was proposed in Polk County but never executed. So we got that from them. So it was kind of foreign to us that this would be a services contract versus, you know, some sort of an agreement, maybe like an MOU. I think we've also talked about the information that the EDC has and provides, and maybe some of that information isn't reaching the proper channels at the county. We have members every year from the county board that are part of our board. This year we've got 3 new members. We've had past members. I'm not sure if any of you have been participants or not. So there is that information, like I said, measurables that are available. We view the county as obviously a premier sponsor of our organization. We feel like we're an extension of the county, not necessarily governed by the county. And so we want to make sure that if the county has issues that deal with economic development, whether they're workforce issues, whether they're development issues, anything that really kind of touches economic development businesses in our community, we want to work together to, help kind of solve those problems or give the resources available if those are things that the county feels that are lacking. But I feel like we do a pretty good job of all those things. I'm also part of the Momentum West Board, which is the collection of a 10-county EDC. So our members, like myself, are extended outside of just St. Croix County. So when you talk about issues like workforce housing, retention, training, those types of things, they're all brought back to St. Croix County with best practices and things like that we try to share as far as throughout the county and throughout our board. So that's kind of where we stand. The agreement, I think, that was shared as a purchase of service agreement, I did run that past my board at our last board meeting. We wouldn't be in agreement of signing a document like this. We could certainly talk about something different, but we don't feel that it's a purchase of service relationship really as this spells out. Any questions? Sure.
So how about accountability? And I know Bill, I read the reports that he gets. I've known Bill for a long time. Is there an accountability as to, can we see that 16 new companies have moved in because of the EDC, or something direct? Maybe it's communication thing that's needed more than any change. Mm-hmm. Is there such a thing available?
Yeah, I think there's. I talked to Ken about this a little bit more in depth. If it's a quarter, we kind of hope that some of the messages or some of the things that are happening with the EDC are being shared through the county board members that go back to your whole group. But it could be something like an annual type report, quarterly report that we are able to share. I mean, we have all that information. There's a few measurables that get to be a little bit gray. When you start talking about, we can talk about jobs created in St. Croix County. When we deal with a business that comes into town, and I'm a developer, so I'm like Bill, giving them information about tax credits, available sites, people to talk to within the county to be able to bring that business here. When that business comes on board, it might bring 100 jobs. Is that the EDC or Bill and I that created those jobs, or is that the WEDC, or is that the county? So the point there is, I think we're trying to bring more jobs. We're trying to keep people here because we're really in a competitive market when it comes to workforce. But to say, okay, show me the 100 jobs that you guys created, we'd have to say, we can tell you we've created 500. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people touching that. So, but as far as other things go, I mean, we keep track of how many business visits we make. Bill's got a document. I kind of summarized, if you guys get our e-newsletter, I went back and looked at the last 2.5 years, so kind of past COVID. We were very instrumental in helping businesses through the Main Street Bounce Back program, if you're familiar with that. So that was a $10,000 grant that they could get. I think St. Croix County had over 1.5 million, Bill? 5.2 million, that we were filling out those applications and helping those businesses either fill vacant spaces or, in some cases, bringing businesses here to take those spaces over. We do a lot of different initiatives, proclamations, where we're trying to go out and recognize businesses. Part of our job is to keep the businesses here, because you in this environment right now, I talked to a person today that their business is considering going to New York, believe it or not, because of workforce issues. So we have to partner with places like UW River Falls, Stout in some cases, Northwood Tech, to hold events such as apprenticeships, how to get it in apprenticeships, co-ops. Housing is obviously a huge one. You know, we do a lot of things like that. The measurable is who's attending these, what are the kind of steps forward that businesses or people are taking afterwards. Sometimes you might not see that for another 6 months, 12 months, but it's kind of boots on the ground and being active in those initiatives. But to your point, yeah, I think we're doing a marketing campaign here that's starting January 1st. We did that a campaign around COVID time, and I realized the numbers there get to be a little bit skewed because everybody was at home on their computers. We had a tremendous impact with, and the campaign was centered around, it was called Think, Make, Happen. It was through WEDC. It marketed to people, young people, but we were trying to bring businesses here, employees here, but also bring people here to visit, so tourism, things like that. The stats were overwhelming, and you can find those on our website, but we know we did a good job of branding St. Croix County, representing St. Croix County, and we're carrying that marketing on now this next year. We're ramping it up again, and those are measurables and results that we certainly have and can share.
Does anybody have any other questions for him?
I just have one for Ken. You've seen this work. Is there something that you would like to see change? I mean, maybe now is the time to have some talks about we would like to change our, the way we interact with them, or I know how this came up. This came up during our budgeting talks, and there's a certain amount of money that goes out, and there were some who asked, well, what are we getting for that money? Because it's not our money, it's other people's money, and we want to make certain that we get the biggest bang for the dollar. Mm-hmm. And can you see anything that would work better, would work poorer, would work? What's your opinion, Ken?
Well, everything works a little bit different. Whether it's better or worse is up to you to decide. I think the question is, do you want to have more direction in how the EDC operates? Do you feel that the amount of money that we're contributing gives us the ability, makes us the 800-pound gorilla, that we can tell them what we want them to do because of how much we're giving them? Or are we just a member and we should trust their board to take the direction?
Go ahead.
Here's my thoughts. I've known the EDC for quite a while, and I would agree that wholeheartedly that we're a member of the organization. We're not purchasing services, I don't believe, and I think it's very similar to our membership on the Wisconsin Counties Association. We're a member. It works kind of the same way. And then I think that everything that we're doing in order is with Wisconsin code for EDCs. And I think that trying to nail it down into a purchase agreement, like Aaron said, trying to get some of those measurables are nearly impossible. If you really want to make somebody accountable for the money, it's going to be really hard to do. And I think moving forward, I would really strongly discourage trying to turn this into a purchase agreement.
Okay. You have anything, Sean, you want to add?
I kind of echo what Ryan said, and I think us being a member is kind of, that's why we have people who serve on the county board serve as part of the EDC too. So I think the membership is appropriate.
Well, I guess the next step then would be if we want to create a motion in regards to item 5 for business items.
I'll make a motion that we table the purchase of service agreement indefinitely.
Supervisor Shirley. Well, I suppose you could do it that way. I think maybe a different motion, you can just entertain it whether you like it better or not, would be to reject the need to contract with the Economic Development Corporation, clarifying that what we're purchasing is a membership, not necessary to have a contract.
Okay. Yes.
Instead of tabling and
I
having it
like
come
that
back
better.
later.
I like that better. Thanks, Ken.
Okay.
So I would reject the purchase agreement and clarify that we are a member of the EDC.
I'd second it.
So we have a motion and a second in regards to rejecting the consideration of a contract with the St. Croix Economic Development Corporation for purchase of services. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and we do appreciate the membership that St. Croix, and the board members that serve on our board too. I mean, they bring a lot to the table, and they have across the years that I've been involved, so thank you.
Okay, item 6. Thank you for coming tonight, by the way. Thanks. Thanks, Bill. See you soon. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. All right, item 6 on the agenda, review of mandated services, land use division, community development with Ellen.
So this will be the last review of mandated services for this committee. We've done a whole lot of other ones, so we're near the end. This is the land use division. The land use division, as provided in the chart in the packet, is about ordinance administration and enforcement. And we basically identified which ones are mandatory, which ones are required under state statute, and which ones are not, and how those work. I would say that this committee is somewhat familiar with, I would think, most of them, if not all. We have the animal waste ordinance, the sanitary ordinance, the land division ordinance, the non-metallic mining ordinance, zoning, shoreland zoning, riverway zoning, and floodplain zoning. Most of them that are mandatory, it says yes, and we are regulating them very closely to what state statute requires. There's a few exceptions here and there, but that's where we might be a slightly more restrictive and have the authority to do that, or we don't. For the most part, the ones that are, the 3 that are not mandatory are all related under our zoning authority under state statute, and that authority makes us partners with our towns, and basically like the non-metallic mining and the zoning and the animal waste are all related to the towns that want to be part of county zoning. And as it states in here, we recently completely rewrote our chapter 15. It used to be chapter 17, but now it's 15 zoning ordinance. And that went through a whole process for each of the towns to decide whether or not to adopt it, and 17 of the 21 towns did. So we are partners with them, and that makes it pretty important that we keep it going because they want us to do that. So I guess with that, if there's any questions or anything else that you'd like me to address regarding this division, I would be happy to do so.
I just have a question. Why 17 out of 21? What happened to the other 4? You know, what's
The other 4, actually, the town of Hudson has had their own zoning ordinance since prior to the county adopting zoning back in 1967. And the other 3 towns, Forest has its own zoning and adopted that back in the mid-2000s, and mostly in response to a wind farm that was proposed. And then the town of St. Joe and town of Troy, they prefer to administer their own ordinance, but they do not administer shoreland, floodplain, riverway, or sanitary. And then land division in Wisconsin, subdivision, land division, is actually what we like to refer to as a layer cake. In Wisconsin, it's all communities can administer it at the same time. So you can have a subdivision at the county level, the town level, and the city or village level, especially in the extraterritorial platting area, and then the most restrictive standards apply. And it does help for some of the smaller towns that might want to have an item or two that they're different. The county administers most of it. We have the most access to staff, and that works quite well. So, that answer it? Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. And we'll move on to item 7 for discussion of setback reduction process for plats and CSMs. Again, Ellen.
Okay. Let me move that forward on the screen for the public. Where did nope, I think, oh, you're right. And what am I doing here? It's like, why isn't it moving? Okay, I think I kept it pretty simple. There we go, I did. So it was asked about the background and the process. So back in, when we last adopted the subdivision, land division subdivision ordinance in 2006. Prior to that, we went through a very long process. First, we updated, and because they worked very closely together, we updated the sanitary ordinance, and then we updated the land division ordinance. The land division ordinance, we made a lot of changes. Many of those changes were trying to be less restrictive and make things more flexible. There was quite a bit of resistance at the local town level to some of those changes. We actually went through 3 separate public hearing processes on the land division ordinance at that time. I was the senior planner at that time and was the project manager for the whole thing. So one of the things that happened as a result of going back and forth and making changes is that historically the county had had a very large setback. It was a complicated one. It was up to 100 feet, depending on where the right-of-way was, whether it was from the right-of-way or whether it was from the center line, because we have different data and information on our roads. Some of the roads are very old, and so it's center line versus right-of-way. Anyway, I did a lot of research at that time, and we really realized that, I don't know if you all realize this, but interstate highways only have a 50-foot setback. Freeways only have a 50-foot setback. We asked ourselves, why are we doing this and taking all that land away from people to utilize for their own purposes? And we quickly came to the conclusion, we don't want to do that. So we recommended smaller setbacks, and we proceeded to talk most of the towns into it. And there were a few that wanted to maintain their larger setbacks, and which they could certainly do, but they didn't want, they didn't believe that it was a good idea overall, and so they would retain them in their platting authority, but not under zoning. And so basically what we ended up doing is they held out, complained, and we ended up adopting this section to our subdivision ordinance in which we had to deal with the fact that for many years also there were things put on the plats, whether it was a major plat or a CSM, in which they actually put the setback line on the plat. We had numerous surveyors who also would come in and say that's not appropriate, you're putting things on the plat that shouldn't be. Staff would say we should stop doing it, and our committee kept overruling it and saying, nope, we're going to keep doing it, we like it. So committees do what they want and we follow it. That's the way it works. So at that time, our committee was agreement to change this, but again, what happened is when you put something on a plat, you can't just ignore it. It has the force of authority under state law. We researched that thoroughly with the state plat review, and they said no. Every time you remove something, it has to go through a process and be recorded at the Register of Deeds. So we had a very short, simple process in here in our ordinance proposed that all it would do was go through that process, and we would make people come in, go through that process, and make sure it happened versus just doing what they wanted. It got the compromise at the time was to make it a committee process so that neighbors could object, because that was what a few of the towns felt, was that no one wanted this change at a citizen level. That turned out not to be true. We've had every waiver go through in the last almost 20 years. So what we are actually doing, we've been updating a lot of ordinances for those who've been on the committee a longer time frame. Supervisor Hansen's not here, but he would know that we've revised numerous ordinances. We keep working on them every year. The next one up for us to revise is our subdivision land division ordinance, and we were already intending to ask the committee for support in taking the whole committee completely out of the process, reducing the process to more of our land use permit, reducing the fee, and making it an administrative process where, yes, they have to come in and do it, and yes, we make sure that they still make the hire a surveyor and make the correction at the Register of Deeds, but it becomes a quick process. So that's what we would like to do. That's what we tended to do. If you want us to move that along faster, we could, but at this point, it's like we've suggested with other projects we've done, it takes a lot of time just to go through that public hearing process, and so we would prefer to do it as part of the larger ordinance revision. It's totally at your discretion. Yes.
What's the timeline on that? When do you think that we'll be enacting the new?
I would hope that it wouldn't take all that long. I know there are some definite changes that the staff want to see. Most of the changes we need in the subdivision ordinance are related to some changes we made about 4 years ago, where there are parts of it we are not enforcing. I've already gone through and marked all those and provided it. I did that 2 years ago now as assistance to the towns who needed to adopt their own regulations for road standards. And so that's all marked up. We know there are other changes we need to make that will bring it in, just like we just adopted the new zoning ordinance. We need to make some changes to bring those things in line. It's been hard because this past year we didn't have staff available to work on that, and now we have it on John's plate to lead the project. He's got a lot on his plate, but I would hope we would do it. I would say it'll take a little bit longer than 6 months, just with as much work as he has on his plate. He's not nodding, so I don't know if I got the right number. Okay, 6 to 8 months. So is that reasonable, or do you want us to separate it out?
With that time frame, I was expecting like the way you're talking, like a year and a half, and I still would have been okay with it. So
Oh,
6 to
okay.
8 months, I'm
Okay, good.
I'm fine with doing it all at once.
Thank you. All right. I had pulled in the interest of time, I had pulled the section related to it out of the ordinance and just made a single page of it. If anyone wants a copy of that, they're happy to have it. You would basically focus on anywhere that it says the committee and the public hearing and the public hearing notice and all that. It would be condensed right down to this administrative decision, really. But just the short process for the administrative cost of processing and documenting that the changes were made. So, all right. That's all I have. If you want a copy, let me know.
All right, thank you, Ellen. And next, item 8 on the agenda is the report on the Glen Hills Park Campground Survey. No, we have Ellen talking on it.
Yeah, I get to talk again. That's a good day, for me anyway. So as we stated in the background information, we actually have a new tool that was made available to us through Adam Kostanek, and so we wanted to test it out, and I'd been wanting to do some surveying at the parks. So we did a quick 4-question survey, sent it out, as it says, this fall. 1,100 past campers who we had email addresses for. This is all electronic online. 343 respondents, that's over 30%, which was excellent. 187 extra comments. I think it's worth noting, whoops, I got the wrong, I keep going to the wrong. Sorry about that. Our overall rating of 4.6, how was your stay? I was told by our marketing coordinator that that is called the sweet spot. If you get anything over 4, nobody gets a perfect 5, then you can consider that like the highest rating you can get. So that's pretty amazing and very proud of our staff for what they've accomplished. Which activity did you enjoy the most? It's a little hard to see, but basically, I'll try and make it a little bigger. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look at this. But what's really, I kind of expected it because when our staff was drafting up this for us, I said, no, we need to add my campsite. And it was like, what? I said, our campsites are beautiful. And I think that's a really big draw, and I want to know. So we put that in, and as I expected, overall #1, the item. And our hiking trails are fantastic. We get a lot of compliments, and our staff tell us people love them. Campground facilities, I think the reason it was split is because of the information in the rest of the survey about people really love our new things we've been building, especially our new restroom shower building, but they want that in the biggest campground area too. So scenic views, of course, and then after that, we've got a lot of great things that people like. For campers, I would expect picnic shelters to be the lowest because they don't get used that much. It's only really with group campers. And the group camp area had the worst looking shelter until now, which they haven't been able to use until next year. So just putting it that way, people like different things, so it's pretty positive. How would you prioritize? We have 4 plans, things in the works that are larger. There's always small things we're doing at the parks to improve, but these are in our capital improvement plan, the first 3 are. And so we said, what do you think is the most important? And as you can see, people could move them around. It was very easy for them to do, which we also wanted to find that out. And a new campground entrance station and restroom and shower building was the #1 by a lot. So. And then more large RV sites, which surprised me because I thought camper cabins would be the biggest draw. But I can definitely understand that. We saw a lot of comments. So as far as the comments, hopefully you read them. But I took a little time, and I will just give you that little bit of new information that I went through them all, and some of them, of the 187, some of them had 4 or 5 different comments in them. So I added up comments, tried to collect them into various groups. And I just will give you the numbers and also just a tiny bit of follow-up. That our parks, our campground, and our staff are great, was 85 comments to that effect. That we need flush toilets, showers, etc. at the peninsula, 23 comments, in addition to ranking it. That the campsite, it's needed leveling or gravel added to the pads, 18 comments, which, by the way, we did use. I think I mentioned that at one of the other county board meetings when I was asked a question, but that work is done, and all should be looking great for next year. That our camper cabins are great. People particularly called them out, 11 comments. That they would like us to lower our fees or offer more discounts. There were 11 comments. That they want water hookups at campsites. Well, I can't really see doing that for our existing ones. However, 9 people asked for that, and our new group camp, 15 of our 15 new sites all have water hookup. Not all, excuse me. The 9 RV sites have water hookup, and technically the 10 sites will have their own water right there. So it's pretty cool. They will maybe be all surprised and happy about that. Electricity at more campsites, again, we have 15 new sites with electricity. We could look into and get pricing for adding it at our 10 campsites that we have at the picnic area that we call Picnic Point, and that might be worth doing. I think people seem to really want that, but there were only 6 comments. More pull-through RV sites. We did have 5 additional comments in addition to ranking it as #2. Pit toilets, restroom cleaning, ventilation, etc. Those are always a problem. No matter, we do a lot to try to clean and ventilate them, but it's hard to stay ahead, especially on really busy weekends. We did have 4 comments not liking that. The swimming beach and water quality at the beach, we got 4 comments for each of those. Basically, this is a man-made lake, It drains a large agricultural area. We do have algae buildup. We've done what we can. It has a lot to do with what agriculture operations are happening upstream. So, and we do clean up the beach. Our staff have actually videotaped it, and we put a video on about how much work they put in every single morning to, we put it on our Facebook site to clean up the beach. But I imagine that there are days when perhaps it doesn't get done before people end up visiting there. So, and the rest of them, I don't have to go through all of them, but I would just say that there was a couple more good ones that we can look into. A playground at the peninsula, which is got our 61 campsites, very busy. They feel there was 3 comments about having facilities more amenable to smaller children. I think we could look into trying to expand that slightly and perhaps finding some additional resources to do that, especially if we were to redo the entrance station there. I could really work it in then. Just thought I dropped that. New dump station, we obviously have a brand-new dump station with our new group camp, which people may find easier to use, and we'll be happy to let them go over there. Restrooms adjacent to the camper cabins, we'll look into that, see what we can do, and then going down, a lot of the other ones, we had only 2 or 1 comment, so unless you guys have something specific that you'd like to ask about, I think that just shows a good distribution, and that sometimes people have a single complaint. So, any comments, questions on this? All right, well, very happy with our staff. It went really well, and very proud of what they were able to accomplish, so.
Ellen?
Yes.
Just one comment. I'm glad to see that people want more pull-through camper sites. They're a lot cheaper than camper cabins, and the maintenance is a lot less, too. And, though
Well, I don't know
nowadays-
if you've looked at the capital plan, because it's a little more money to get it started. Okay,
Yeah, a lot
right.
of people have some pretty nice campers. I'm sure they would just as soon sleep in that than in the,
yes, they would, and that's part of why they'd like water, because then they wouldn't need to use our showers that are old and outdated. But we also have people who ask for more tent sites. You know, there was a couple comments on that, and I think just overall, it's a very attractive site, very attractive place, and we're keeping it that way, or we hope to keep it that way. Dennis and his team do an excellent job. So. Okay.
Well, thank you, Ellen. So our last item is a resolution authorizing advisory referendum to issue bonds for development of Eckert Blufflands Park. We got Ken?
Yeah. Supervisor Hanson had requested this agenda item to be placed on the agenda, considering we'd approved a referendum last month. I think it sparked the idea for him. One difference, though, between this referendum request and the other referendum that we're doing for public safety is a state process where the voters are making a choice. What the voters choose on the public safety one is what happens. That's a binding referendum. You can't create a binding referendum to allow the voters to choose whether to borrow money or not. It would only be an advisory referendum. So if you do this referendum, this is advice to the county board of whether they should issue the bonds. It still requires a 3/4 vote of the county board, irregardless of the referendum results of whether you still want to borrow the money. So that's one of the big differences that I wanted to point out for you. As far as the project itself, the 170-acre park that we've acquired along the St. Croix River, we're estimating 14.8 million roughly in current dollars of what that project would be to fully develop it. And so we picked a dollar amount to put in here, but that number is subject to change by you. If this is something that you wanted to move forward, that should be something that we probably talk about. So 14.8 million in current dollars. I just rounded it up to 15 million, but in all likelihood with inflation, it could be hitting as high as 18 million by the time we actually implemented something like this.
When earlier in the year, we talked about the KIP and the long-term plans. Wasn't the dollar amount for this project drastically more than this?
No, it wasn't more,
It wasn't? Okay.
no.
All right.
No, the Eckerd Bluff lands also could be split into phases, although the first phase is 10 point some million dollars. That's kind of the initial part that you have to do to make it a usable park to begin with. But to fully develop it really is only jumping to the 15 million mark then.
To me, I don't like the timing of it. We have a public protection referendum on the ballot already. I would hate to in any way water that down or mix what is going on there with an advisory referendum, which I don't like anyway. But I think that given that on our KIP, on our long-term plan, we had this out 2-3 years, I think that we need to wait on this and come back to this in a few years.
Yeah, I'm just basically want to echo what Supervisor Shirley stated, that it would kind of muddy the waters a little bit, and we should do this not so close to another much larger referendum. That's not much larger, not this one. Another referendum that's on the ballot already.
So I'll make a motion that we table this referendum discussion for,
I would say you could postpone it.
we'll postpone it, yeah.
Because it could always be brought back up at a future date, different timing and stuff would be.
Yeah. So postpone any discussion with the referendum.
We have a second? Okay, Sean, for a second. Okay, any discussion? I guess I just want to bring up the fact that on this particular item, when we go to do it, I am definitely in favor of trying to do that project as a single large project versus doing this in pieces. And my reasoning behind it is that as we do that particular project, it's going to require staff to try to manage this place and do things. And if you don't have all of the opportunities there for providing some income back to offset the additional staff we're going to need to do it, it's going to be difficult to manage. So therefore, the reasoning that I really would prefer to see it done as a large project and do it, when we do it as a whole. So, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. So, any announcements and correspondence?
We don't have any, no.
So for our request for future agenda items, there's a couple that are on there. We're going to have a rezoning and one setback waiver for January 19th meeting. Is there any other requests for future agenda items?
I'd like to see a presentation of our procedures and how we work with moving things to Board of Adjustment and how that process works and how we use Board of Adjustment from the zoning to BOA. And a discussion to go along with that. So the presentation on the procedures and our use of Board of Adjustment and how that gets transferred from Community Development Department to BOA.
Probably the roles and responsibilities of BOA.
More in line with how you deem that it moves there versus in-house.
Any other requests for future agenda items? All right, seeing none. So our next meeting again is Thursday, January 19th, 2023. And we'll adjourn the meeting at 6:15. Thank you.